Hi, welcome back to Beyond the Facade. I'm Doña Junta. We're back with a new episode 7 actually. So,
Woohoo!
and we have here Sabrina,
Hi.
and we will be talking today to Brian, also known on Instagram as a history collector, and he's going to be sharing all about himself and his page and all the work that he's doing. And we'll be happy to hear from his adventures and endeavors in history. So thank
This
you.
is a very exciting one. You guys better listen in.
I'm excited for it. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay.
I grew up seeing the Banning House and, going to hearing the Banning High School band like every single day, like
Yeah.
practicing and going to Holy Family Church. And then my family moved to Long Beach. I want to say around 2001, but we were still here like late 2001 because I remember seeing on TV because I used to have a TV in this room because this is my childhood room. Um, Seeing 9/11 like happening live on TV in this bedroom.
Wow.
And so I have a vivid memory of that, obviously, because it was such a historic moment in our generation's lives. Um, and uh, and so I want to say it was late 2001. So after that we moved to Long Beach, and I lived there ever since. But I just moved back. My grandma still owns the house that I grew up in, so I'm here to kind of help take care of her and have my own space again, which I didn't have because my family grew since then.
Uh-huh.
I have more siblings. At the time, it was just me and my brother Daniel when we moved. But my family, if you go back, we've been here in the United States for over 100 years, first coming around the 1910s. On my grandma's side, we're originally from Michoacan, Mexico, so central Mexico, and both my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family are from Michoacan. We are indigenous Purepecha, but we also have African ancestry as well as Jewish ancestry, which I just found out, which is kind of like just so surreal to think about that.
Yeah.
But I say that it speaks kind of to the legacy of the history of the Americas, because the Americas is a really diverse place, and it's kind of fascinating to know that the blood that flows through my veins is kind of diverse, and that's also kind of what my Instagram kind of taps into, is kind of like the diversity of who I am and the diversity in what I see around me and how I connect to it. But yeah, so that's a little bit my family history and my background. Wilmington raised, and then the rest of the time continued being raised in Long Beach and went to college. I went to Long Beach City College. I went to UCLA then after that. And now I'm currently working on my master's, which on my Instagram, it says historian in training. People like to call me a historian, and I guess that's okay because I already have 2 degrees in
Yeah.
history. But I'm like, nah, it's kind of like that imposter syndrome. Like, I don't think I'm worthy of that just yet. Like, I'm still working on my MA. Let me finish my MA, and then you could call me a historian. So for now, I'm a historian in training.
Good.
Where
So,
do you see yourself when you finally get your master's? What calls you? What career is calling you?
Oh my gosh. So I feel like right now I'm kind of in like a transitional period and trying to figure out kind of what's the next step, just because of the pandemic has kind of shifted a lot of things and kind of made me reevaluate the course. But for now, it still seems like I'm going to be going to what I've been wanting for a long time, and that's first a curatorial position to work as a curator. I was originally a film major, which is great. I went to an arts high school. I was an artsy fartsy kid who went to Renaissance High in Long Beach. It was an arts high school with like they did everything. They did everything under the sun, performing and visual arts. And I tried everything when I was there. Like I'm gonna I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna experiment with this. I'm gonna experiment with that. Like I have no training in like reading music, but I was like, hey, you know what, I'm going to take a piano course, and I learned how to play the piano. And like I did ballet, which is perhaps the strangest thing I ever did. But anyway, so I used to be a film major, and I love the idea of storytelling and creating worlds and immersing yourself into those worlds, and and showing that to people, right? Immersing an audience into that space. And even though I'm not a film, I'm fortunately I couldn't finish my film degree, and I didn't pursue that route necessarily. In many ways, I feel like history, which had been a passion for me since at the same time I was into film, history is another way in which I could still continue to tell stories and immerse other people in these worlds that necessarily don't exist in their fullness anymore. And as a curator, it's like an incredible opportunity to do that because, you get to, whether it's an exhibit, telling a story through an exhibit where it's just, let's say, pictures, artifacts, and, words below it or labels, or whether it's like, remodeling a historic home and, renovating it and making it look as it looked like in the 1930s or as it looked like in the 1850s, and immersing those people into that space in a very real, in a very authentic manner, and recreating these worlds that again have faded to the past. So curator's kind of like the main goal for now, and we'll see when I get there. I had already started a new collections job at my local historical society. I work for the Historical Society of Long Beach. And so I was working in collections for a long time, but because of the pandemic, we kind of like had to shift the direction of a lot of people's jobs there at that time because of funding, and again, because things just changed up. So now I'm working on membership and development, which is actually, even though that's like not necessarily what a curator would do, it kind of speaks to what my goal after that would be. And the goal after that would be to be a director or like a president of a historical institution. It could be a historic home, or it could be, like a history museum, or maybe even an archive. But I think that's the ultimate goal, because I really love the opportunity to be able to be, I guess, a representative of history, and be able to speak for it. And I think being president of a historic institution is an incredible opportunity to do that.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
When did you notice, like as a youth, that you were interested in history? When did the passion start to spark that you could remember?
So that really started actually here in Wilmington. So my mom is a teacher she started at Wilmington Park, and now she still teaches in LAUSD, so she still teaches locally. And she would always get flyers from the museums, for her students, to pass out for her students. And she usually taught fourth grade. Like that was a grade that she loved to teach. And if you know about fourth grade, like that's California history, right? That's
Missions.
the missions and the gold rush, and a lot of history maybe that we're teaching inappropriately, but we could talk about that later. But that it's the California history time period. So she would get all these little flyers, and because I was an only child for a good portion of my life, she would always like to engage me in like cultural activities and the arts, and getting out there and going to museums and seeing things. And so she would get these flyers for events, and she would take me to them. And the ones that I remember the most is actually going to the drum barracks and the banning house. And if you guys don't know about, I'm pretty sure both of you know about the drum barracks and the banning house, but for those on the podcast that are listening, the drum barracks and the banning house are historic homes from the 1860s. The banning house is from 1864. The house that the drum barracks museum is housed in today is also from the same period of time, 1864, but the land was used as a military base starting in 1862 during the American Civil War. And so I would go to these events there, and I thought it was just the coolest thing ever that these people got to dress up. And it's because it was events, they were normally like living history reenactors there, and they were dressed up in their costumes, and I'm like, that's so cool, I want to do that. And then I remember, it's so funny, my first memory of the drum barracks is going to one of those events, and it was it was going to one of those. I went to two. I have two memories. One of them is going to Hispanics in the Civil War, which is a really cool event, and that was the first time where like I got to find out that Latinos served in the war. And like somebody asked me like, "What's your name? Are you Latino?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "My name's Chavez." And they're like, "Oh, here's a list of all the Chavezes that served in the American Civil War." And I was like, "Wow, that's so cool." And I turned to my mom and like, maybe we're related to one of them. And she's like, "Yeah, maybe." I don't think so, but at the time I thought it was just so cool, and that's one of my first memories. And I also was like really fascinated by these people that knew all this history, and I wanted to be like them. My other memory goes back even before that, and that was to the years in which Marge O'Brien was the director of the drum barracks. And Marge O'Brien, if you ever got, I don't, Sabrina, did you ever get to know her, Marge O'Brien?
I remember Catherine, I believe her name is.
Okay, so yeah, Kathy's
Yeah.
on the board, but and then just a disclaimer, I'm not talking for any of the museums in this podcast. Like I'm speaking as myself and my experience with these museums, but I'm not the voice of them today. So if I say anything, it's my words only and not the museum's words. Just to kind of put that out there. Kind of a funny memory was when I went during Marge O'Brien's, leadership of the drum barracks. She was one of the first directors or the first director of the drum barracks. Um, she really wanted to promote the museum, and she thought that the best way to promote the museum was to really like go all in ghost. She was super into the supernatural. She's like, we got to go all in because that's how people are going to come here. And they used to do haunted houses. Like we have photos. Well, sorry, the drum barracks has photographs um, of like gallows and like ghosts and like what else did they have? Like zombies and vampires, like all these like real, it looks like Not Scary Farm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because they
wow.
used to do like haunted houses through there. Like this was back in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah, I never heard of them.
And they also did an unsolved mystery there.
Yes,
Like
I
I don't know if you,
remember that.
yeah, they
I
did
remember
unsolved
that.
mysteries. And that used to be part of the tour back in the day. I
Oh,
don't know if you ever got to take a tour in that time period, but
no.
like
No,
you
not in that
would
time
go
period.
in, you'd go into the library, and then you'd watch this movie, the Unsolved Mysteries movie, and about the museum, and then you'd go to the rest of the tour. But I remember being terrified, like absolutely, like simultaneously terrified of being there and hearing this story about ghosts, as well as simultaneously being fascinated. So like, it was just so funny. It was a fascination, but also like this very intense fear of what these spirits were that were
Yeah.
there. And, my cousin, she lives right behind me, who I just saw today, um, Lupita, she actually, or we call her Piti, she actually worked at the drum barracks when I was in high school. And at the time, obviously, I have this memory of like the cool history and being involved and getting to dress up, but I also have this memory of like the ghost that's still kind of in my mind. And my cousin's like, hey, we're going to be doing docent training. Would you like to be a docent? And we're going to have like, a ghost training too. And I was like, ooh, I want to do the ghost training.
So this is when you were still a kid or later?
So this is already by high school. So I've always had like this lingering fascination because again, like my mom like took me to all the events and I was like, oh, I remember making butter at the Banning house. That was really cool. You could probably got to do that too much, Sabrina, when you did the educational programs in the summer.
Unfortunately, during those times, they frowned upon people with tattoos. I was never like put forth as someone who even
Oh.
directed anybody around the house. I was in the background dressing the dummies,
So
but I love
Oh.
fashion, so that was okay.
Oh, well, you still did something cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like
Yeah.
that your mom was such a influence for you in a very positive
Yeah.
way that inspired you to love history even more. That's admirable because you grew up with that passion, from what your mom brought along. So that's awesome.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like in all of my career, I have to thank women for being where I'm at today because it has always been a woman that has moved me forward, for the exception of one man. There's one man who's absolutely incredible, and I got to work with before I went to the Historical Society, and that's Steve Nelson, who's the director at Fort MacArthur. And
Okay.
he also was really committed to moving me forward and, advancing me in my pursuit. And then I also have another male professor, but for the most part, it was all women professors, and women in my life, like my grandma and my mom, and then the directors of these museums that I eventually encountered, many of them also women. And um, so Beatty, so my cousin too, Beatty, she's like, hey, you should volunteer at the drum barracks. So I volunteered at the drum barracks, and I became a docent, but it was all about the ghost. At that time, I was like, I need to know. But I was really into Ghost Adventures too, because Ghost Adventures was like peak when I was in high school. So I was like, oh, I want to do a ghost, I want to do a ghost investigation of this place. And even Susan Ogle, who was the director at the time, she was like, oh man, this kid, he's so childish. But she, in her head, like, again, she's one of the remarkable women in my life, that's been in my life. She's one of the women that really pushed me to really get into this field and see history, and see historic spaces as something that's really important, and not just a bunch of ghosts. She really kind of remolded me. I feel like she had this mission as soon as I came into the drum barracks. So she's like, we're gonna help mold this kid in the right direction. And she did, because she was, she's no longer the director, but I was the last person that she hired, because she really felt that I could fulfill the mission of the drum barracks and do those duties appropriately, which, if you would have asked her when I first started volunteering as a kid in high school, she would have been like, this kid's not ready for a job. Like, this kid will never work here because he's going to talk about the ghost all the time. But yeah, so that was kind of like the beginning of it. And then I was still a film major for, even going into college. But then, like, I kind of that ended up changing, and I decided to pursue history, just because of technicalities in transferring to the university I wanted to go to. And I still had the intent of minoring in film, but that didn't work out. But while I was doing my courses in history, especially at UCLA, is really just when I started to connect with history as something that is not just past, but is present, is living today. And there was a lot. It was, closer to 2016. It was between 2014 and 2016. So during that time period is kind of like the lead up to a really polarizing period. I mean, it was already polarized in the US before that, but it was increasingly polarizing. And we had politicians, who I won't say their name on this podcast, but politicians who are very anti-Mexican, anti-immigration. And I'm a product of immigration. I'm a product of Mexican Americans, and the legacy of Mexican Americans in the United States. And it was while I was at UCLA that I really started to connect with the idea that we still have to address the issues of the past. We have to come to terms with, the racial differences that occurred in the past, the racial injustices. And we also have to recognize the agency and the incredible will of, Black, Indigenous, people of color to advance social justice, to try and build a better America. And it was at UCLA where I just had the most incredible professors that really, opened up my eyes and allowed me to see myself in history, to see myself reflected in it, and empowered me to use history as a weapon, as a weapon to show the humanity of myself as a person of color, but also the humanity of other people, and move social justice forward. And so it was like this just really incredible kind of realization, a great awakening. But I've had several, for time's sakes, I won't go, into every single one, but I've had
we
several,
might touch on some of that as we go along.
We probably will.
That's okay.
I did want to do my research on you. So I went through your whole page
Yeah.
from beginning to end, and I could see the shifts and changes in the different interests that you had through the years. So I did want to kind of start off. I seen that you started posting around 2012, and maybe it was like this is like your personal page. It's not separate than just like a history page. It's your
No, it was personal. Yeah.
combination, right?
Yeah.
So I in the beginning I noticed a huge theme with Disneyland, and I would love Sabrina wants to really talk about Disneyland. So
I'm dying to know, what is your favorite ride? First off,
people can't do that to me.
You come on, you have to have a favorite.
You know what? That's so hard. Jeez,
Pirates
is the first one that came out, but so that one's the first one that came out. But that's because like if anybody knew me in high school, like Pirates of the Caribbean was my thing. Like my room was like painted like the color of the ocean, and I had like a huge pirate flag that would scare all my conservative Mexican aunts when they would see it. They're like, ay, yo no quiero ver eso, like quítalo, está feo, you know. But I'm like, nah, I'm keeping it up. It's a cool pirate flag. But I was super into Pirates of the Caribbean. Like I loved all the movies. Like I was into the music too. Like Hans Zimmer is one of my favorite composers, and it also ties to like my love of film. So Pirates of the Caribbean, I guess, would say would be one of my top attractions for sure, hands down. But I think I have a love for several other ones, and for particular reasons. And like one of them is like the Haunted Mansion. I've always been in love with the Haunted Mansion because
that's my heart.
Victorian, because Victorian. I love the Victorian era. Again, like my childhood at the Banning House and the Drum Barracks. So it's like very nostalgic to see that, you know, Greek revival architecture, and you know there's East Lake architecture in the interior, so you know 1867 post 1867 furniture and architecture and wallpaper. The wallpaper super East Lake, and I love the lines of East Lake. I love the, you know, the cubist forms, and you know the Haunted Mansion does it. The Haunted period, it does it. And then also I'm still like ghosts, by the way. I still like ghosts. So so Haunted Mansion, I guess, would be one of the top ones too. And then Jungle Cruise. I love the Jungle Cruise. I love it during the day, and I love it at night. I love cruising through the jungle. Like I think it's like so, like all the forest, the vegetation. Like I feel like I don't even care about the animals. I feel that sounds bad, but like I don't care about the animatronics. Like the thing that I love the most about the Jungle Cruise is just being on a boat and going through vegetation. Like I think that's just so cool. Like all the, you know, the hanging moss and the palms. It's awesome. And then the tiki room, because I love tiki culture. Like I love, like it's campy, it's kitschy, it's like it's so 50s and 60s. Like it's the best of the best in terms of old school Disneyland. So yeah, and then I also have a nostalgic side for the rides that are no longer there. Rest in peace. But yeah.
So when was your first visit to Disneyland, or what got you started in the love of Disneyland? Like, was it a repeating thing? Like your parents took you often, or were you an adult when you finally saw it?
So I want to say that it was like I first visited in 1995 or 1996, which is like when I was like 2 or 3. I was born in 94, so I want to say the first visit was on Christmas. They took me for a Christmas. That was like the big
how special.
Thing. Yeah, and
Christmas is so beautiful during Disneyland.
Yeah. And I know, like I have a box from my first visit with like photographs and like an autograph book, because you know how you could like get an autograph from all the characters.
Aww.
And so like, and my mom took me to every single one. She's like, I gotta go, you know, we gotta go see every single character. So it was in the 90s, and my family, they took me probably like once a year at the time. Like I want to say I was more into like Wild Animal Park, the one that's like the safari park that's part of the San Diego Zoo. Like I love that. Like that was for me when I was a kid, like the animals and the jungle, like all the vegetation. Like that was super cool to me. Like I love that. Like I wore my khakis. I looked like Steve Irwin when I was like a little kid, you know. Like I did watch The Crocodile Hunter when I was a kid with my dad, so I was super into like that whole like safari, like stuff. And Legoland was the other one because I was really into Legos. Um, so Legoland we had like a pass to Legoland. So those are like the main ones. But then like 2001 came around and we had my brother Daniel, and like I guess my family couldn't really travel really far because my brother like was still really tiny or didn't want to go, drive all the way down to San Diego. So we got an annual pass to Disneyland, and that was around the time California Adventure opened. And like we had a pass consistently from that moment until like 2012. So like
Wow.
every single year. So like I saw, the evolution of California Adventure because I was there every single, like all the time, every single year. And my cousins had it too. My cousins that lived here in Wilmington, I remember going with them to Disneyland all the time. And my friend Amy, who's my childhood best friend who I grew up with, she also had passes. So it was something, my family, my friends, we all kind of frequented throughout the years. And it's just obviously like many other people's experiences here in Southern California or other parts of the US, you kind of grow nostalgic for, those childhood years, and you still keep going back.
Any particular food you have to have? Like, let's say you can only go in for 2 hours and you can only pick one item. Which item is it going to be?
Again, another thing you can't do. You just can't do that to me. I want to say, so there. Okay, I'm gonna say two. So
Okay.
if I'm at Disneyland, okay, I have to go to the Golden Horseshoe
Oh.
and have a hot fudge sundae.
Okay.
Hands down, Brian's favorite. Okay, that's Brian's favorite. You want to experience Brian Disneyland? Go to the Golden Horseshoe, watch a show, have a hot fudge sundae.
Have a hot fudge sundae. All right.
And
what's the second one?
The other one, I have to include California Adventure, right? Because that's
okay. Fair enough.
California Adventure, if I'm going there, it's Bodine's, right? And like the Pacific Wharf.
Yeah.
And the bread factory.
Yes.
And it's a Chinese chicken salad bread bowl.
Oh, wow. I've never had that before.
My absolute I love that food so much. Like, eat it like anytime anybody says, you want to have dinner at Disneyland? I'm like, only if we're going to Bodine's and we're having the Chinese chicken salad. Like, that is my absolute favorite. What was that?
Make note of that.
Yeah.
Yes. Make note. You see, something you need to know, Brian. Doña Junta is not a girl who goes to Disneyland. And I've been trying to get her to go for a long time. Maybe you're describing it sounds so much better and animated than mine. Me, I'm like, if I'm going to California Adventure, I'm going to have a margarita. That's the only thing I care about.
Hey, you know what? That's okay too. I like drink. I'm more of a wine guy.
That's why we only went as a child. That's it. I didn't grow up. Well, because I came from a family of 4, so I don't think we could afford it. I think we just went once, and after that, I didn't return until I got older. But I don't know. I don't know,
and it's not for everybody.
You guys know it.
Yeah, it's not for everybody, and I'm also not like I'm really into Disney, but I would say that I'm not like one of the crazy like Disney fans needs to have every single piece of merchandise, needs to be there for the new release of the pin, and they're doing this event, so I have to be there at the line, at 5 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, that's not me. That's not what I do. Like I think the craziest I ever got was grad night was on the night, grad night happened when Cars Land was going to open. So I went to grad night at Six Flags, got no sleep, I'm lactose intolerant, had a terrible lactose intolerant attack, like terrible, and went straight to Disneyland after grad night. No sleep, just so I could go see Cars Land. But I also like their stuff, aside from that I like. I love Route 66. I love that architecture, that time period. So there's other stuff obviously I was drawn to, but that's probably the craziest Disney thing I've ever done. Outside of that, I haven't been that crazy. What draws me to Disney is the history. I'm really super into like mid-century architecture too.
You turned into Walt in some of your photos.
I did turn into Walt in some of my photos. Yeah, I think the first one on my Instagram that I'm like Walt Disney is of me like at a table where I'm like kind of like grinning and I'm like this, and I have like I can't grow a mustache. And so I drew in my mustache, and it was an
Oh,
old Hollywood party with my friend Bridget and my friend Darwin, and we were celebrating somebody's birthday. I can't remember who, but we're all kind of like into history, so we decided to do old Hollywood. And I'm like, I'm gonna be Walt Disney. So like I try to piece together a kind of a costume that would, kind of look like what he would have worn. And I think that's the first one that I posted. And then there's a few, like, I don't try to be Walt Disney, but I try to mimic what he wore. Like
right,
that's important there, that I don't try to look like Walt Disney, but I
right.
try to mimic what he wore. And so like I have suits that look just like the ones he wore from the 50s and 60s. His 60s outfits are preferably my favorite.
Yeah,
But
so I was looking and I seen that you had a Disney collection on display, or you had something. Did that just start from you going over the years collecting items, or just like going to shops, or what would you say? What does that collection consist of? I know there's
yeah,
like,
so I think one of the first Disney items, I mean, aside from personal items, like I still have all the stuff from the 90s. I have all the stuff from when like California Adventure first opened, but like that stuff that's like personal to me, because obviously it's like stuff that I collected when I was a kid or my parents
Mhm.
collected for me. Um, and then I also have all the Chevron cars, which I've been thinking about this like for the last month about where those Chevron cars are. I don't know if you ever went to the gas station
Yeah,
and like got, there's like the Chevron cars and their
yeah,
toys and they have the eyes that open up.
yes.
Yes.
So like they came out with it in like when around the time California Adventure opened, I want to say, they came out with a line of Disney cars.
Mm.
And I have a lot of them. And some of them were like the different versions of the Autopia cars or Autotopia, whichever one you like to call it. But version was like the series of those particular cars, the models of Autotopia. And so I have those too, but those are also personal stuff. I don't know where they are though, but those are also personal stuff. As soon as like that, like, excuse me, one of the first things I started to collect um, that was outside of something I automatically collected from my childhood uh, was tickets. The A B C D E tickets, the ticket books
Uh-huh.
that you use for Disneyland, and Knott's had them too.
Mm.
But I went to an antique market, and they had them, and it was like it was, I want to say, about 4 or 5 ticket books, and they were for $40. And at that time, I was still a kid in high school, like really young, and I remember thinking, oh, that's a lot of money. Like I didn't have a job. Like I collected cans,
Huh.
like the recycling, and
Oh,
Yeah.
that's how I would make my allowance, was collecting those cans. And so I didn't have much money at that time because it was my can sales. And so I spent my can sales um, on buying these ticket books, which now they're worth way
It's
more
so
than what
much.
I,
Can
yeah.
you explain to us what those are? Because I don't think Doña Junta knows what those are.
Yeah, let me see if I think I have one here.
Oh, awesome.
Let's see if I could pull it out.
Yeah, our listeners would like to know ones that
So
aren't, Disney fanatics like some of us
yeah.
here.
This one's the one in the best condition. And
Okay.
so the ticket book, the way it worked is there used to be a whole page in front of it.
uh-huh.
Um, and just imagine, for those of you who can't see on the screen, imagine kind of like a memo pad or like a notebook.
Okay.
Um, and it's just like usually about 5 sheets of paper, and they vary in size. There would be one big sheet in the front that would be the ticket of entry. You rip that off, and then what follows afterwards, well, there's a welcome to Disneyland in the front of this one. This is one of the early ones, by the way, and it's basically like a message from Walt. And when you look inside of them, so like there's A attractions, and you would use this A ticket that you would rip off, and you would give it, and it would have usually more than one. I don't know exactly how many were sold of each one, but I want to say there was usually more than one A, but they would all be the same size and a different color each letter. And so for like the A rides on Main Street, you could ride the horse cars.
Uh-huh.
You could ride the horseless carriages. So that's like all the cars. The omnibus, the fire engines. In Tomorrowland, you could see the 20,000 Leagues exhibit.
So only one time you could get on the rides by using the ticket once?
Yeah, so like that ticket, so like this A ticket, I would give to the front, kind of like at the county fair. You give 4 tickets, and then
I
you
remember the tickets.
ride the Ferris wheel, right? So you'd
like
give
like a carnival system.
yeah, and you would give 1 ticket, but again, you would usually have more than one. So this one looks like it only ever had 1 A, and it's still there, which is remarkable. This one had
what year was that from?
several C's. I want to say this one's about 1961.
Okay.
And the ticket books weren't the first. They didn't issue the ticket books right when the park started. I can't remember what the system was but they didn't look like this. This version didn't happen until a few years after the park opened, from my understanding. I could be wrong. But the one that you really wanted, and you probably hear people like, it's become a popular culture phrase, is the e-ticket. Like the e-ticket is, an e-ticket ride. Like that's an e-ticket ride is kind of like a saying that even for people who haven't been to Disneyland, like they've probably used that phrase before. And it's just saying like, oh, that's a really good thing. That's a really good fun attraction, or that's a really good fun ride or fun thing to do. So like the e-tickets are like, kind of like more adventurous ones, like roller coasters. So you have the monorail, you have the trains, Nature's Wonderland. So like the Mine Train, the Pack Mules, the Jungle Cruise. So these are usually, obviously, like the excitement level is a little bit higher. So that's kind of how it works in categories. Kind of goes from like a ride that may not be as thrilling or maybe shorter to a ride that is like the most thrilling attraction is like the e-ticket. So it goes A, B, C, D, E. And this is an adult ticket book. I have they're all over the place
like
because I haven't organized.
Throughout the years, you just started finding different Disney items, and as you were collecting at vintage shops or whatnot, and then just started.
Yeah. So. Yeah, to cut the conversation short on this one, basically like after that, like I got hooked. I'm like, I need to find more of this stuff. And the thing that draws me most is like the aesthetic of them. Again, the mid-century. I love all like that mid-century stuff. Mid-century aesthetic is so cool. The colors, they're so vibrant and different. They're different to the colors we use today. And I also started collecting Disneyland photographs. So I have a collection of Disneyland photographs. I would say that's like the biggest thing is kind of like Disneyland ephemera. So like the old maps, I collect the old maps. I have the old ticket books, and I have the photographs. I don't really collect big Disney things, so you won't find me with like a huge like Santa Fe Railroad sign. I actually have a funny story where one time I tried to buy a Disneyland Santa Fe Railroad sign, only to find out that it was like 2 inches by 2 inches.
Oh no.
And I thought it was huge. I thought it was like 2 feet, but it was this tiny little sign. And I was
like $1 million. Here's a sign.
I paid a good amount for that sign too, but I was so dumb and I didn't read the eBay description, and well, that's what happened. So lesson to the children out there, make sure that you check the eBay listing and read the description.
Right. I did also, do you have any other questions on Disneyland, Sabrina? Because I have one last.
No, because ask the last one because there's so much I want to ask him. And so, because time's limited, I'm like, oh, no, let's go on. Go ahead, ask the question.
I noticed a couple of times you were almost like manifesting your future job at working at Disney Studios. I think you had a picture standing in front of it. So was that when you were interested in film, or were you like thinking I'm going to archive or do history for Disney? Like, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, that actually wasn't that long ago.
Okay.
And I think it blends still my love of film, love of cinema, my love of Disney and like Disney history, with with history, and what I do in history. Like it blends everything together. It's a nice blend. And so basically what you're referring to is a trip I took to the Walt Disney Archives. And it is like, that's, if I could manifest a dream job, it's
Yeah.
working for the Walt Disney Archives, and
Oh,
even eventually making it to be the president of the Disney
yeah.
Archives. And
Nice.
I got to meet Dave Smith, who was like the first, he was the archivist, the lead archivist and the one that started the Disney Archives. I got to meet him at the LA County Fair because he was selling his book and nobody was around him. Like he had the Disney had lent like items from the archives to the LA County Fair, and they had them on display. And I'm like, I have to go see this exhibit. And I didn't know that Dave Smith was going to be there that day. And so I was like looking at the multi-pane camera. If you guys don't know what that is, the multi-pane camera is like glass panels that are stacked on top of each other. And there's a camera that films down, looking down at these glass panels that are stacked on top of each other. And each one would be hand painted. And that's how Walt Disney added dimension to his essentially 2D films, or
yes.
these animated films.
Mhm.
The way in which you add that dimension where the background looks further away, and you could also like shift the backgrounds as the characters move so that it looks like there's dimension to these, again, originally just two-dimensional characters, was through the use of the multi-pane camera. But that's a whole other history. But anyways, I was looking at this camera, and then I looked to my left, and then there's Dave Smith, and he's by himself, by his book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is the guy that started the Walt Disney Archives. Like he's the guy who's like, we got to preserve Walt's office. He's the one that like officially like ended up helping the recreation of Walt's office, like cataloged down to the detail of like the pencil, the eraser, and exactly where it was in his office. Like this guy's incredible.
Yeah.
And that was, I want to say, like early college. So I was still pretty young at that time. And I'm like, I want to be this guy. I want to be this guy. Like, I want to be this guy. And like, after having met him, and he was an absolute wonder to meet. After having met with him and having a conversation with him, and I bought his book too. I'm like, I want to be you. I want to do what you do. Like, this is cool. And it's always been a kind of a dream of mine, like, because again, it kind of blends everything I like
Yeah.
together.
Nice. So go ahead, Sabrina, get down to your Disney.
Well, no, I mean, I think we've talked about all the questions I wanted to ask him about Disney. I can definitely see how much you love Disney, and I can totally relate because I'm the same way, and my kids are the same way, and long-term annual pass holders and so forth. So I really like the animated way that you put into words your love for Disney, and even to the less rides or the less attractions. You didn't say they were the boring ones, and I thought that was really cute. But I actually wanted to ask you about the drum barracks.
Oh, okay, here we go.
I'm ready to talk about the drum barracks. So
okay, let me drink some water first.
Yeah,
okay?
drink some water.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that in this section about the drum barracks. But
do you want to hit World War that one
just
first?
real quick, because I noticed also a big theme is World War II, 1940s, and
Fort Mac.
There's a lot of that, right?
I do a lot.
There's a lot. So I guess you can speak on it throughout, but yeah, the drum barracks definitely one thing that is also seemed like you kept going back to it through the time. I don't know if you were there the whole time or kept going back, but yeah, definitely the drum barracks is interesting to hear more about that.
Do you want me to talk about it now?
Yeah, Sabrina, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was a little confused for a second.
What's your question?
Or we could talk about the other topic. I'm fine for any.
We'll go throughout.
Do you want to start at World War the Fort Mac and like World War II stuff, so we can get that, because I think the drum barracks is going to be a little bit more hefty.
No, I was just saying, like, I noticed that the 1940s, World War II was a lot of the theme I noticed. And I mean, there's been several themes. The 19th century, like I said, the Ranchos, the the missions. I mean, they're different things, but I did notice a lot of in the earlier beginning, the 1940s, and then later I noticed it transitioned more to like later in time with the ranchos and missions. So I don't know if that was intentional. If you learn new things or you wanted to display it more. So
Of the Instagram. So I guess I'll give you a little bit of background, and you don't have to incorporate this into the into the pod, obviously. But my Instagram wasn't always public.
okay.
Yeah, and the reason why it became public was actually when I lived in Rome for a short while of time with other UC students. We did a study abroad thing, and when I was in Rome, I had kind of like this mission of every single day I'm going to see something because there's kind of like the saying in Rome that you will never get to see the whole city
Mm-hmm.
because there's just so much history. There's just so much everywhere. You can't see it. And so I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. Let's go. Let's see something every single day. So every single day, like if I, there's days where I wasn't in Rome. There was days where I went, on excursions, outside. But for the most part, every single day I went and I saw something new and I would photograph that. And I've removed a lot of the photographs since then. Like I've cut down my Instagram.
Okay.
But I took a lot of pictures. Like every day I would post something. And that was also to kind of like keep my family in the loop of like, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have cell reception and I kind of knew how to work Skype, but I didn't really. So that kind of communicating with other people was just kind of weird. So I used Instagram as a medium to like help connect with my family at that time. And
Right.
Facebook was annoying in that year because it was 2016. So you could probably figure out why it was an annoying.
Oh yeah, of course, the
Yeah.
elections.
So I
Yeah.
really was trying not to be on Facebook at that time. So Instagram was kind of like the main means. So I posted something every single day, and my roommate Joseph was like, "Hey, you post really cool stuff, and you're like showing places that people don't see every single day. Like, tourists to Rome don't even pay attention to." He's like, you should think about making like this page public, or maybe even like making a page outside of this where you could
Mhm.
share kind of like those everyday random things that you encounter or that you like or you find interesting because you post fun stuff, like you
Right.
post exciting stuff. And I was like, really? You think so? I mean, I guess. So then it was really after that, after 2016, that I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go public and I'll start like just put and for the most part I try to remain authentic to me and not make it a page where because I'm public I'm
Mhm.
making new things. Like I feel like I'm still doing the same things that I would do if my page was private and just for my family and friends. I would still be posting the same stuff. So like there's definitely been an evolution in what I've posted. Again,
Mhm.
not all of it is still there today, unfortunately. I did remove a lot of stuff just because I thought it was cluttersome. Not because it was like controversial or anything. I was just like, oh, time to clean up the Instagram. So I deleted a bunch of stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of like the history of how it started. So like there's things that are definitely out of order, but I started doing like I started getting into World War II stuff, but I never posted about really the drum barracks early on, even though I did drum barracks before the World War II stuff.
I see.
So the order of what I did isn't necessarily always reflective
Does
on
it
my.
match with the timeline of history, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's definitely get to the drum barracks. I mean, I don't have I've been to the drum barracks several times just to give a little insight on me. I've been to the Powder magazine building when I used to work for Slangwich Studio or volunteer with them. They're some of my friends' art studio in Wilmington.
Mm-hmm.
They did a lot of art projects related to that Powder magazine thing. Growing up,
Awesome.
going to Wilmington, I would hear that it was like haunted and things like that. So you guys could, I don't know, that's what I heard, that one was a little bit haunted or more haunted, I don't know. And then for a while just going there just to see the museum, and I think I went to like the Wilmington uh, Chamber of Commerce meetings there. I don't know why I was going there, and they held them there a few times, but that's it. I wasn't going probably as often or connected as much as you or her. So
Mm-hmm.
go ahead, share about that.
Sabrina, did you want to ask me a question?
Well,
Or did you
I
want me to
think
just give a background?
definitely get the background. I definitely really want to hear about your paranormal experiences.
Okay, yeah.
And any kind of, especially I was a docent, an active docent for 10 years at the Banning.
Mhm.
And I even think I might have met you because I remember
I
a
have a
kid.
strong feeling we met. I
We're
have a really
probably around 13 or 14 years different. So I was an adult
yeah.
and you're a young teenager. I have a memory of a kid talking about a camel in the gift shop, but he looks very similar in my memory to you. So I feel like it probably was you.
It was either me or Britton. Britton was the other guy. We're also close in age, and he's Latino as well. So kind of maybe, and we have like similar skin tone. So
Does he have
maybe
glasses?
I think he did. He did wear glasses
Okay,
sometimes.
well
Yeah,
then if
not all the
so,
time. Not as much as me though. Not as much as
I
me.
remember the kid I spoke with, and I say kid, I apologize, but you were like a kid, or
We were
whoever was like a
young.
kid
We
to
were
me. Yeah.
young. Yeah.
And I remember someone, and he resembled how you look. So I was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is so interesting. But I would love to hear any kind of paranormal experiences you may have had in the drum barracks and the banning, if you had any.
Okay. Do you want me to start with a little bit about the drum barracks though?
Maybe let me just ask you a question and rephrase it better this way. Okay. Brian, can you please tell us about some significant experiences you may have had inside the drum barracks, specifically paranormal? And if you've had any inside the banning, I'd love to hear as well.
Okay. Um, so in terms of paranormal activity, it it's never any like full-on apparitions or like demonic entities. It's not anything like that. And I'm going to refer to what Susan Ogle used to say in the past, that if anything's here, and here meaning the drum barracks, it enjoyed the time in which it was here, and it is not here for malicious intent. It is just reliving the past.
Mhm.
And I really believe that if anything is at the drum barracks, it's residual energy. It's energy that is left over and just kind of still coming out of the wood, coming out of the artifacts that are there. And we have some artifacts that, you know, are probably heavier in terms of that energy and might not be as positive, because it is a place that deals with war. And I think that's important to understand. And if, I think all of us here are familiar with the drum barracks, but for those who don't know as much about the drum barracks, it was a military base started in 1862 on Phineas Banning's land. So that's how it's tied to the Banning House, as well as a business partner, Benjamin Wilson. Um, and it was 59.4 acres of land. And the idea was to start a military base where they could protect the port of Los Angeles, the Pueblo of Los Angeles, and train troops to send out to Arizona and New Mexico territory to ensure that the Confederates didn't push westward, as well as to secure, unfortunately, Anglo hegemony or control of the Arizona, New Mexico territory from indigenous populations. So there was a lot of obviously injustices committed against indigenous peoples at the hands of the Union Army in the American Southwest at this time. So as a result, I want to say that those negative energies, that negative history might still linger there too. But I also think that there's positive energies, and I think the positive energies that are there are the energies of the people that enjoyed the time, again, just like Susan used to say, enjoyed the time in which they lived in that building, because it's a beautiful building. The building that survives today used to be the home of the officers, particularly lieutenants and captains lived in that building.
You describe the
Um,
architecture for the audience?
yeah, so the architecture is kind of like a blend of like Greek Revival federal style, which is very popular in military barracks at that time, especially in the American Southwest. Um, it's a white building with green shutters. It has the window shutters, which is really cool. And then it has like Italianate influence on the very top crown of the building, which is very beautiful to look at. The interior is very bland in comparison. It's military off-white with brown floors. So it's not as exciting as other Victorian homes like the Banning Mansion that has like wallpaper and gold trim and really the what was the green? Acid green, right? In the
Acid
parlor
green,
room.
yeah.
The acid green. So none of that at the drum barracks because it was a military home. So it was a little bit more regimented, right? A little bit more strict. So the inside again is not as ornate, but the exterior is nonetheless beautiful. And the architecture of the drum barracks mimics in many ways the architecture of the Banning House. The Banning House is obviously a lot bigger in size. And I don't know 100% the credibility of this. Maybe Sabrina knows a little bit more. I can't remember what the director had told me about when I asked him, but I do know that there's this rumor that the Banning House was built out of some of the remnants of the drum barracks. Not 100% sure if that's true. If some of that leftover stuff, but
No,
I would say
I
it's
have
just
no idea,
I would just
unfortunately.
I would just say it was popular styles. That's just why it looks similar. It is just a popular style. And also the colors might have been different. It's important to understand that in the 1930s, in the 1920s and the 1930s, colonial revival was very, very popular. And colonial revival was kind of like this retreat into neoclassical colonial American architecture. Like the ones that we picture, Yankee Doodle and what's it called? George Washington, that kind of time period of architecture. And people were really into that in the 20s and 30s. It died very quickly. And obviously here in California, the predominant one was Spanish colonial and Art Deco. But nonetheless, this was a popular style as well as Tudor. And so the Banning House and the drum barracks were both repainted around that time period to be just like that full on white to reflect.
Have they always been white?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the Banning House, if you look at, what is it? I have the Banning House book back there.
I do too somewhere.
Yeah, it's in my shelf behind me. But
Yeah.
If you look at one of the original prints that was done in the 1860s of the Banning House, and it's a color print, the house is yellow in the print. And like mustardy yellow was a very popular color in the 1860s. And if you want to see what that color is, look up Abraham Lincoln's house in Springfield.
Yeah, we'll look that up.
If you look up that house in Springfield, that's the color that I think the Banning House would have been. And if you look at the photographs of the Banning House in that same time period, photographs unfortunately don't exist of the drum barracks for the exception of one photograph of a camel, which is a whole other story.
Which is a whole other story that we want to hear.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about the camels in a bit.
Okay.
But like if you look at the pictures of the Banning House, like they're dark. The house is dark. And if the house was white, it would not have been that dark on the photographs. And the reason why I think
like this yellow house, for Abraham Lincoln, you talk about this house?
Yeah, that's correct.
So it's like it's like a mustard yellow.
That would have been the original color of the Banning House.
Oh.
And I think they still have to do research. Obviously, you have to dig into the woodwork and like cut out all the different layers to see if that really was the real color or not. But I'm pretty sure that was the color, and I have other people who back me up in that. And I think the drum barracks was a similar color. But nonetheless, the building's white today. And a little bit about the camels. They had camels in the 1860s because they thought that using camels in the military in the Southwest was a good idea because it's an arid climate. Where do camels come from? The desert, right? So it's hot. And they're like, well, maybe these animals might work because, they use them in the Middle East. Why can't we use them, right? They use them in Asia Minor. Why can't we use them? So they actually shipped animals from North Africa and Turkey. And they brought men who were of from Asia Minor, from the Mediterranean. Like Hijali is one of them, and Greek George. I can't pronounce his Greek name, so forgive me, Greek George. But Greek George was kind of like his Americanized name, which is a terrible name. But Greek George and Hijali or Haj Ali would be his name in his native tongue.